Oakland, California, December 1964. A cold afternoon that would forever change the history of martial arts. Behind the closed doors of a small kung fu school on Broadway Street, two men faced each other. One was Bruce Lee. The other was Wong Jack Man, a traditional kung fu master from San Francisco's Chinatown. What happened in that room over the next 8 minutes was meant to remain a secret forever. But secrets have a way of coming out, and this one reveals everything about who Bruce Lee really was. This is the story Bruce Lee never wanted you to hear. It all began 3 days earlier. Bruce Lee was teaching classes at his Junfan Kung Fu Institute in Oakland. He was only 24 years old, but he was already causing a sensation. He was doing something unthinkable, something forbidden. He was teaching Kung Fu to non-Chinese people. In 1964, that was considered betrayal. For centuries, Chinese martial arts masters had kept their secrets strictly within the Chinese community. They believed their fighting systems were sacred and should never be shared with outsiders. But Bruce Lee didn't care about tradition. He believed truth had no nationality. He believed anyone who wanted to learn should have the right to do so. This earned him enemies, powerful enemies. The traditional Kung Fu community in San Francisco's Chinatown was watching him. They saw his mixed classes, his American students, his revolutionary teaching methods, and they were furious, deeply furious. On the 1st of December, a messenger arrived at Bruce Lee's school. He was young, maybe 19, dressed in traditional Chinese clothing. He walked into the school in the middle of an afternoon class. Bruce was demonstrating a technique to his students when the young man approached. The messenger didn't bow. He showed no respect. He simply handed Bruce an envelope and left without a word. Bruce's students gathered around as he opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in Chinese characters. One of Bruce's Chinese students read it aloud. The letter came from the martial arts community of San Francisco's Chinatown. It was formal, traditional, and absolutely clear in its message. Bruce Lee was breaking ancient codes. He was dishonoring Chinese martial arts by teaching them to outsiders. He must stop immediately. If he did not stop, he would be challenged. Bruce read the letter again, slowly. Then he did something that surprised everyone in the room. He laughed. Not nervously, not uncertainly. A genuine, amused laugh. He carefully folded the letter, put it in his pocket, and went back to teaching the class as if nothing had happened. But his students noticed something. For the rest of that class, Bruce Lee's techniques were sharper, faster, more intense. Something had changed. 2 days later, on the 3rd of December, Wong Jack Man arrived in Oakland. Wong Jack Man was not like the young messenger. He was a serious martial artist, trained in the classical styles of northern Shaolin. He was in his late 20s, tall for a Chinese man, lean and muscular. He had a reputation in San Francisco's Chinatown as a formidable fighter. He was known for his speed, precision, and strict adherence to traditional forms. But more importantly, he was known as a man of honor. When the elders of the martial arts community asked him to deliver a message to Bruce Lee, he agreed. Not because he hated Bruce Lee, not because he was jealous, but because he believed in preserving tradition. Wong Jack Man arrived at Bruce's school exactly at 4 in the afternoon. He was accompanied by 5 other martial artists from San Francisco, all dressed in traditional training uniforms. They entered the school without knocking. Bruce was in the middle of giving a private lesson to one of his students. He stopped immediately when he saw the 6 men walk in. For a moment, no one spoke. The atmosphere in that small school became heavy, electric. Bruce's student instinctively stepped back, sensing that something was about to happen. Wong Jack Man stepped forward. He spoke in Cantonese, clearly and formally. He said he had come on behalf of the traditional martial arts community. He said Bruce Lee had received a warning and ignored it. He said there was now only one way to settle the matter: a challenge fight. If Bruce Lee won, he could continue teaching whoever he wanted. But if Wong Jack Man won, Bruce Lee must close his school and stop teaching non-Chinese people. The rules were simple. No rules. Traditional challenge duel. Fight until one man could no longer continue. Bruce's student later recalled that Bruce didn't hesitate for even a second. He looked at Wong Jack Man, then at the 5 men standing behind him. He glanced at his watch, then spoke, also in Cantonese. He said, "Fine, but not today. Give me 2 days to clear my schedule. Come back on Saturday, the 5th of December at 2 in the afternoon." Wong Jack Man nodded. Saturday, 2 o'clock. Then he and his companions left as quietly as they had come. After they left, Bruce's student asked him if he was worried. Bruce Lee turned to him and said something the student never forgot. "Worried? No. But on Saturday, I will learn something important, either about him or about myself." Bruce Lee didn't tell many people about the challenge. He didn't announce it. He didn't brag. He simply prepared. On Thursday and Friday, he trained differently. His wife, Linda Lee, noticed it immediately. He wasn't practicing flashy techniques or complicated forms. He drilled basics over and over. Punches, footwork, timing. He was preparing for a real fight. Linda asked him if he was concerned about the challenge. Bruce told her he wasn't worried about winning or losing. He was concerned about what the fight would teach him. He knew Wong Jack Man was a talented traditional warrior. He knew this wouldn't be like the demonstrations or sparring sessions he usually did. This would be a true test. Friday night, Bruce barely slept. Not because he was nervous, but because his mind was racing with scenarios, strategies, possibilities. Saturday morning arrived cold and grey. Bruce got up early, did light stretching, ate a small meal. He told Linda to stay home. He didn't want her to see the fight. It was going to be serious. At 1:30 in the afternoon, Bruce arrived at his school. He opened the door and walked in alone. He cleared the training area, pushed equipment to the sides, created an open space in the center of the room. Then he waited. Exactly at 2 o'clock, Wong Jack Man arrived. But he was not alone. He brought the same 5 martial artists who had accompanied him on Thursday. Behind them came 2 more men, older, clearly masters from the traditional community. Bruce Lee had invited no one. He wanted it to be private, but when he saw the group entering his school, he understood. This was not just a challenge duel. This was a statement. The traditional community wanted witnesses. They wanted proof. Bruce didn't protest. He simply gestured for them to come in. The 7 guests entered and lined up along the walls of the training area. They stood silently, watching, waiting. Then, at the last moment, something unexpected happened. 3 of Bruce's students appeared in the doorway. Somehow they had heard about the challenge. They asked if they could watch. Bruce looked at them for a long moment. Then he nodded. If Wong Jack Man could have witnesses, So could he. The students entered quietly and stood along the opposite wall from the traditional masters. Now there were 10 witnesses in that small school, 10 people who would later tell very different versions of what happened. Wong Jack Man stepped into the cleared space in the center. He removed his jacket, revealing a simple black training uniform. He began warming up, traditional stretches and forms, moving with precise, controlled motions. Bruce Lee did not warm up. He simply stood at the other end of the space, watching, analyzing. One of Bruce's students later said that Bruce looked different that day, not angry, not excited, calm, dangerously calm. When Wong Jack Man finished warming up, he assumed a traditional kung fu stance and nodded to Bruce. Bruce Lee nodded back. One of the older masters from San Francisco spoke. He said in Cantonese that this was a traditional challenge duel. No strikes to the eyes, no strikes to the groin, no attacks to the throat. Fight until one man submits or can no longer continue. Both fighters nodded in agreement. There was no referee, no bell, no countdown. The older master simply said one word. Begin. For the first few seconds, neither man moved. They circled each other slowly, maintaining distance, measuring one another, calculating. Wong Jack Man held the classic northern Shaolin stance, weight evenly distributed, hands set for attack and defense. His movements were textbook perfect, exactly as traditional forms teach. Bruce Lee's stance was different, lower, more mobile, weight constantly shifting. It wasn't any recognizable traditional posture. It was something he was developing, something new. The witnesses held their breath. Then Wong Jack Man attacked first. He lunged forward with a traditional straight punch, fast and precise, aimed at Bruce's chest. It was a probing attack, meant to test Bruce's reaction and speed. Bruce slipped the punch easily, shifting his upper body just enough for it to miss his shoulder. He didn't counterattack. He simply returned to position and continued circling. Wong Jack Man attacked again, this time with a combination. High punch followed immediately by a low kick. A classic traditional combination meant to split the opponent's attention. Bruce blocked the punch with his left hand and checked the kick with his shin. Still no counterattack. Still only defense, observation, learning. The traditional masters along the wall gave slight nods of approval. Wong Jack Man's technique was flawless, exactly as it should be. But Bruce's students noticed something else. Bruce wasn't just defending. He was studying. His eyes never left the center of Wong Jack Man's body, watching subtle weight shifts, the telegraphing before each technique. Wong Jack Man increased the pace. He unleashed a series of attacks, punches and kicks, presses forward, trying to put pressure on Bruce, force him to make a mistake. Bruce gave ground, retreating, absorbing the pressure, his defense tight and efficient. This lasted perhaps 30 seconds. To the witnesses it may have seemed that Wong Jack Man was dominating, forcing Bruce to back up. But then something changed. Bruce Lee stopped retreating. It happened in an instant. Wong Jack Man threw another straight punch, the same one that had worked before, but this time Bruce didn't slip it. He didn't block it. He took it. Bruce's hand shot forward and caught Wong Jack Man's arm at the wrist. Before Wong Jack Man could react, Bruce closed the distance and was inside his guard. What happened next occurred so fast that witnesses argued about it for years. Bruce hit Wong Jack Man with a rapid series of straight punches to the body and head. Not wild swings, not telegraphed attacks. Short, direct, explosive strikes from close range. Wong Jack Man tried to create distance, tried to get back to his preferred fighting range, but Bruce stayed with him, maintaining closeness, cutting off angles, not letting him escape. The traditional masters along the wall shifted uncomfortably. This was not how traditional challenge duels were supposed to look. There was supposed to be an exchange of techniques, a display of forms and classical combinations. This was something entirely different. This was a street fight. To his credit, Wong Jack Man didn't panic. He changed strategy. He used footwork to create angles, moving sideways instead of straight back. He threw quick kicks to keep Bruce at range, but Bruce adapted instantly. Every time Wong Jack Man tried to establish his preferred distance, Bruce closed it again. Every time Wong Jack Man tried to use a traditional technique, Bruce interrupted it before it could fully develop. One of the traditional masters later said that watching Bruce Lee fight was like watching water. He had no fixed shape. He simply flowed into every space Wong Jack Man left open. The fight had lasted about 2 minutes. Both men were breathing harder, but Wong Jack Man was breathing much harder. He was discovering something that would forever change his understanding of martial arts. All his years of training, all the perfect forms, all the traditional techniques meant nothing if he couldn't create the time and space to use them. And Bruce Lee was giving him neither time nor space. Around the 3rd minute, the fight changed again. Wong Jack Man made a decision. He couldn't win this fight standing and trading blows with Bruce. He had to change the game completely. Suddenly, he dropped low and shot for a takedown, trying to grab Bruce's legs and bring the fight to the ground. It was a desperate move, not part of traditional northern Shaolin training, but Wong Jack Man was now fighting for survival, not for style points. Bruce sprawled, defending the takedown, spreading his legs and dropping his weight. He wrapped his arms around the upper part of Wong Jack Man's body and began hammering short, clubbing strikes to the back of his head and neck. Wong Jack Man released the takedown attempt and tried to create separation, but as he backed away, Bruce pursued him aggressively. That was when the fight became truly chaotic. Wong Jack Man began moving around the room, trying to use space to reset, catch his breath, find an opening. And Bruce chased him, not wildly or mindlessly, but purposefully, cutting angles, hurting him, not allowing him to recover. Witnesses had to press themselves against the walls as the two warriors moved through the room. Furniture was knocked aside. Equipment was toppled. What had begun as a formal challenge duel had become a desperate chase. One of Bruce's students later described this phase of the fight as terrifying. He said it looked as though Bruce had become something else, something relentless and unstoppable. Wong Jack Man threw everything he had. Spinning kicks, jumping techniques, desperate combinations. Some of his strikes landed, but they didn't slow Bruce down. Bruce's counterattacks were different. They were precise, economical, targeted. He wasn't trying to knock Wong Jack Man out with one big blow. He was breaking him down systematically, blow after blow, pressure after pressure. Around the 5th minute, Wong Jack Man's movements began to slow. His techniques became less sharp, his footwork less precise. He was exhausted, but the fight wasn't over yet. Wong Jack Man's back hit the wall. For a moment, he had nowhere to go. Bruce was directly in front of him, cutting off escape routes. This was the moment the fight could have ended. Bruce prepared for what looked like a finishing combination. But then something unexpected happened. One of the traditional masters from San Francisco shouted in Cantonese. He said, "Enough. The point has been proven." Bruce stopped his attack mid-motion. He stepped back, breathing heavily, looking at the master who had spoken. Wong Jack Man, still against the wall, also looked at the master. His face showed a mixture of relief and shame. The master stepped into the fighting area. He looked at both men and spoke again. He said the challenge had been settled. He said there was no need to continue to injury or humiliation. He said the traditional community had seen what it needed to see. For a moment it seemed the fight was over. But then Bruce Lee did something that shocked everyone in the room. He said, "No." Bruce looked at Wong Jack Man and spoke directly to him, ignoring the master who was trying to stop the fight. He said in Cantonese, "We agreed to fight until one man could no longer continue. Can you continue?" Wong Jack Man, still leaning against the wall, exhausted and hurt, straightened up. He looked at Bruce for a long moment. Then he nodded. He could continue. The traditional master tried to protest, but Bruce cut him off. He said this was between him and Wong Jack Man, no one else. Wong Jack Man pushed himself off the wall and returned to the center of the room. He raised his hands to a fighting position, though his arms visibly trembled with exhaustion. Bruce respected that. He didn't attack immediately. He waited until Wong Jack Man was set, ready. This wasn't cruelty. This was Bruce giving Wong Jack Man the chance to face it with dignity. The witnesses were silent. The atmosphere in the room had changed. This was no longer about style versus style or tradition versus innovation. This was about will, about who wanted it more. Wong Jack Man attacked first in this final exchange. A desperate lunge with a punch, everything he had left. Bruce slipped it, caught the arm, and swept Wong Jack Man's legs out from under him. Wong Jack Man fell heavily to the wooden floor. Bruce followed him down, establishing a controlling position, ready to finish the fight with ground strikes. But he didn't strike. He looked at Wong Jack Man and asked him in Cantonese, "Are you finished?" Wong Jack Man, pinned to the floor, unable to escape, didn't answer immediately. Witnesses later disagreed about what happened next. Some said Wong Jack Man verbally submitted. Others said he simply stopped resisting and turned his face away. But everyone agreed on one thing. The fight was over. Bruce Lee had won. Bruce stood up slowly. He was breathing hard, covered in sweat, but he was uninjured. Wong Jack Man stayed on the floor a moment longer, then slowly rose with help from one of his companions. The room was completely silent. One of the traditional masters approached Bruce. He bowed formally and deeply. He said in Cantonese, "You have proven your point. We will not challenge you again." But Bruce did not return the bow. Instead, he said something that would be debated and discussed for decades. He said, "I didn't prove my point. I proved that I have a lot left to learn." Everyone in the room looked at him in confusion. He had just won decisively. How could he say he had things to learn? Bruce looked at his hands, flexed them, feeling them. Then he spoke again, more to himself than to the witnesses. He said, "This fight took too long. It should have ended in seconds. My techniques were inefficient. My conditioning wasn't good enough. If Wong Jack Man had been armed, if there had been multiple opponents, I would have been in trouble." Wong Jack Man still catching his breath, looked at Bruce with disbelief. He had just been defeated, and his opponent was criticizing his own performance. But Bruce was serious. The fight had shown him weaknesses in his own approach. He had relied too much on chasing, on pursuit. He had wasted energy. His finishing techniques weren't decisive enough. In Bruce Lee's mind, this fight was not a victory. It was a lesson. The traditional masters didn't know how to respond. They left quietly, taking Wong Jack Man and the other witnesses with them. Bruce's students stayed for a moment. One of them asked Bruce if he was satisfied with the win. Bruce didn't answer directly. He walked over to a chair and sat down heavily, his body finally showing the exhaustion he had suppressed. He said, "Starting Monday, everything changes. We're going to train differently. We're going to think differently. Today showed me that traditional techniques are too complicated for real fighting. We need something simpler, more direct, more efficient." His students didn't fully understand what he meant in that moment, but they understood later. In the coming years, Bruce developed and refined what he called Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist, an art without fixed forms, without classical techniques, only principles of directness, simplicity, and efficiency. The fight with Wong Jack Man was the catalyst for that revolution. After everyone left, Bruce closed the doors of his school and stood alone in the training area. The room was a mess. Equipment was scattered, furniture shifted. There were marks on the walls where Wong Jack Man had been pinned during the chase. Bruce didn't clean up right away. He stood there, replaying the fight in his mind, analyzing every moment, every technique, every mistake. He realized something profound that day. He realized that in real combat there is no time for beauty. There is no time for classical form. There is only what works and what doesn't. And many of the techniques he had been teaching, techniques from traditional Wing Chun, didn't work as efficiently as they should. That realization was both liberating and unsettling. Liberating because it freed him to explore new approaches, unsettling because it meant rejecting years of traditional training. When Linda Lee came to the school that evening, she found Bruce sitting in the dark, still in his training clothes, deeply lost in thought. She asked him how the fight went. Bruce told her he won, but he said it without pride, without satisfaction. She asked what was wrong. Bruce said, "Today I won, but someday I may face someone faster, stronger, better trained, and with my current level I could lose. That's not acceptable." From that day on, Bruce became obsessively focused on improvement, not just physical, but philosophical. He began studying biomechanics, kinesiology, Western boxing, fencing, wrestling, anything that could make him more effective. The fight with Wong Jack Man humbled him in a way that victory usually doesn't humble people. In the weeks and months after the fight, something strange began to happen. Different versions of the story started circulating. Wong Jack Man's version was that the fight was essentially a draw. He claimed he was never defeated, but that the fight was stopped by the masters before a conclusion was reached. He emphasized that Bruce broke the agreed rules by using grappling and ground fighting. Some of the traditional masters who were present supported this version. They said the fight was inconclusive, that both warriors showed skill, that it proved nothing beyond the fact that different styles have different strengths. Bruce Lee's students told a very different story. They said Bruce dominated from beginning to end, that Wong Jack Man was completely defeated, that the fight ended with Wong Jack Man on the ground begging for mercy. Bruce himself rarely spoke about the fight. When asked, he usually said it was a private matter and changed the subject. But to his close students and friends, he occasionally mentioned it as the fight that changed his life. Not because he won, but because it exposed his limitations. The truth, seen by the 10 people who were really there, probably lies somewhere in the middle of all these versions. Yes, Bruce won. That is not seriously disputed. Wong Jack Man ended up on the floor, unable to continue. But it was not the total domination some of Bruce's students claimed. Wong Jack Man was a talented fighter who landed clean strikes and forced Bruce to work hard for the victory. And the fight lasted longer than Bruce wanted. By his own admission, about 7 to 8 minutes. For someone at Bruce's level of skill, fighting one-on-one against an opponent, he felt it should have ended much faster. The question is, why did different witnesses remember it so differently? Some say it was ego. People remember events in ways that support their existing beliefs and loyalties. Others say it was the speed and chaos of the fight. In the heat of the moment, with adrenaline and emotion running high, precise observation is difficult. But there is another possibility few people consider. Maybe the different stories exist because Bruce Lee asked for them to exist. Here is something very few people know. 3 days after the fight, Bruce Lee met privately with Wong Jack Man. That meeting was witnessed by only one person, a mutual acquaintance who was asked to arrange it. According to that witness, Bruce approached Wong Jack Man not as an enemy, but as a fellow martial artist. He told Wong Jack Man he respected his skill and courage in accepting the challenge. Then Bruce made an extraordinary request. He asked Wong Jack Man not to speak about the details of the fight. He asked him to tell people it was close, inconclusive, open to interpretation. Wong Jack Man, confused, asked why. Bruce explained his reasoning. He said, "If the martial arts community believes I completely destroyed Wong Jack Man, it will create problems. It will make him a target. Every traditional master will want to test me to prove their style is superior. But more importantly," Bruce said, "I don't want to publicly humiliate Wong Jack Man. He fought with honor. He accepted defeat with dignity. There is no need to destroy his reputation." Bruce suggested that if the story remained ambiguous, with different versions circulating, it would actually benefit both sides. The traditional community could save face by claiming it was a draw. Bruce could avoid being a constant target of challenges. And the real lesson of the fight, the need for martial arts to evolve, could be quietly realized without public controversy. Wong Jack Man agreed. The agreement was never written down. It was never formalized. It was simply an understanding between two martial artists who had tested each other and learned from the experience. That is why, to this day, there are so many different versions of what happened in that Oakland school on December 5th, 1964. Not because people are lying, but because Bruce Lee deliberately created ambiguity to protect both himself and his opponent. The fight with Wong Jack Man was never filmed. There are no photographs. There is no objective evidence of exactly what happened. All we have are the memories of 10 witnesses, filtered through time, emotion, and loyalty. But the impact of that fight is undeniable. After December 1964, Bruce Lee's approach to martial arts changed completely. He abandoned the idea of style altogether. He stopped teaching Wing Chun as a system and began teaching principles instead. Speed, directness, efficiency, simplicity. These became his obsessions. He trained harder, studied deeper, questioned everything. The physical conditioning that later made him famous, the incredible speed and power, the philosophical depth, all of it can be traced back to the lessons of that 8-minute fight. Wong Jack Man, for his part, also changed. He continued teaching traditional kung fu, but he incorporated some of the lessons from his encounter with Bruce. He became less rigid, more open to adaptation. The two men never fought again. They were never friends, but they maintained a respectful distance. When Bruce Lee died in 1973, Wong Jack Man was one of the few traditional masters who attended the funeral. He bowed before Bruce's coffin and said a prayer in Cantonese. Someone asked him what he was praying for. He said, "I am thanking him for the lesson he gave me about my own limitations." So, what is the truth about the secret Bruce Lee never wanted you to know? The truth is that the fight itself was never the secret. The fight happened. Witnesses saw it. Stories were told. The real secret is what Bruce learned from it. He learned that traditional martial arts as practiced in 1964 were not efficient for real combat. He learned that forms and techniques must serve function, not the other way around. He learned that evolution is more important than preservation. But he also learned something else, something deeper. He learned that defeating an opponent is easy compared to transcending your own limitations. Wong Jack Man was never the true enemy of Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee's true enemy was his own complacency with his current level. The fight forced him to confront the gap between where he was and where he needed to be, and that realization, that hunger for constant self-improvement, is what made Bruce Lee a legend. The fight lasted 8 minutes. The lessons lasted a lifetime. Bruce Lee never wanted you to know about this fight, not because he was ashamed of it, but because he wanted the focus to be on the principles he developed afterward, not on the event that inspired them. He wanted you to focus on Jeet Kune Do, on the philosophy of constant self-perfection, on the idea that the best fighter is not the one who knows the most techniques, but the one who can adapt to any situation.